My name is Nate, as Peter said, and I'm really excited for tonight. We get to talk actually about a much tougher topic than normal. Today we're actually going to talk about brokenness. And it's in conjunction with all that we're doing with CU Hands and Feet. We're actually going to have a 3-week talk series now on service. And so today I'm just going to talk about brokenness, what it is, why there's brokenness in the world, what God's response is. And then after this, in the next week and the week after that, Troy Rendelman and Scott Berkey are going to be, it should be on the screen, but it's not, are going to be talking about practicals of how do we really respond to this broken world. But before I begin tonight, a little bit more about me. I actually am a pastor's kid. I'm a PK, and I went to a Christian grade school growing up. So, some other people in this room may have gone to that same grade school. And so basically, to say the least, I was a sheltered little kid. And in 5th grade was when I got my first girlfriend. Her name was Stephanie. And Steffi and I, we talked once a week. It was awesome. And in 6th grade, I actually was on a youth group retreat with my friend John. Now, you got to remember, I'm very sheltered here. So John and I were staying up late, and we were having Mountain Dews, and we were talking, and somehow, like every 6th grade conversation, it got to the topic of who do you like? And so I was asking John, he was asking me, and he asked me, and of course I said I like Stephanie. And then I asked him, and then he said he liked Stephanie also. And then I said, that is awesome. I was like, that's so cool. Like, you also like Stephanie? Like, we share that in common. That is awesome, man. Like, what if I don't remember how this conversation went down, obviously. I also don't really understand how I was thinking at this moment. But I asked, what if we actually, dated her together? I'm not even kidding. And so then John was like, dude, I don't think it works that way. And then I don't know what I said, but it was along this line of thinking. It was, we just have to like her. It doesn't matter if she likes us back for us to be dating. A sheltered little kid. It's very confusing. So sure enough, I convinced John through my great persuasion, and we dated the same girl, Stephanie, for a week until my sister caught wind of it and harshly rebuked me, and that stopped. So, but Stephanie and we actually kept dating all the way up until 8th grade, until she dumped me for my best friend, Ben. Ben, this is the same Ben who dated my sister in high school. Best friend dating a sister? Yep, Ben. Just remember that name, Ben. But Stephanie and I, we dated until 8th grade, and then we held hands once, which was scandalous in those 3 years. Crazy. In high school, we kind of drew apart. I didn't really talk to her as much. She started dating this guy later on in high school, and I hadn't talked to her senior in a while. And then freshman year here at U of I received this phone call from her, and she told me that she was pregnant, and that all of her family and all of her friends were asking her to have an abortion. Yeah, that was how I felt when I got that. I remember right the place where I was when I got that phone call. It shocked me. And also John, who I was telling about in that story, I didn't know it then, but in 6th grade, that was when his parents actually told him that they were getting a divorce. And if you know my friend John, he has not recovered still from that in 6th grade. So Stephanie and John, those are real people. Those are not their real names. Ben, that is his real name. But, as we talk about brokenness tonight, it's not hard for any of us to really look very far before we see brokenness. There is brokenness all over the world around us. It is so overt. It is so right in front of our faces. And so today what I'm going to be talking about is I'm just going to be addressing this. What is brokenness? Why is there brokenness? And how does God respond? And so this talk may be a little bit tougher than most. And so I do ask you to just gently open up your hearts to receive what's going to happen and what we're going to talk about. And what I'm going to share, I have no desire to be trite. I also, on the other hand, don't want to manipulate emotions. I'm not trying to manipulate us here. I do just want to be honest about the brokenness of our world, and I want us, my prayer is that we would feel and see the world as God sees and feels the world. And I know that I may bring something up to you that reveals a hard memory from your past. And I want you to know that as a Jesus follower, I mourn with you. I'm sad by that. I'm so sorry for those things that may come up. But I do want to bring it up. And I do not say it to harm you or shame you, but I hope that in your life healing can come from Jesus. As maybe you see too, I do feel really unqualified to talk about this tonight, so I'm just going to start out in prayer. So pray with me. Father, I do pray that you would break our hearts tonight as your heart is broken. Open up our hearts and minds today to feel, experience, and think like you do. God, I do not ask for made up or strange emotions. I just ask that we would feel and experience the heart of God. Lord, would you give us your heart? We beg you. Amen. So over the last week, I've been researching some overtly broken things in the world. I've not been enjoying researching this at all. In fact, it's actually it's been really painful to really look and take an examine of where our world's at and some of the things I oftentimes ignore. I also will not enjoy sharing these things. But there's one common theme that keeps hitting me as I looked at all this, and that's just the fact that it's not how it's supposed to be. It's a world that's not how it's supposed to be. So I'm just going to run through some statistics really fast here. According to an article published by the Food and Agriculture Organization, 870 million people in the world today do not have enough food to eat. About 25,000 people die every day of hunger-related causes. According to the United Nations. That's one person every 3.5 seconds. Most of these are children. Today, these 3 children died: Zabia Bilali, Paki Takiwira, and Komali Katari, because they didn't have enough food. The Human Development Report states that 3 billion people live on less than $2.50 a day. It's not how it's supposed to be. According to the WHO and Joint UN AIDS program, 1.5 million people die a year from AIDS, many being children who are infected in the womb. And close to 1 million people die each year from malaria. According to the United Nations, estimated 100 million people worldwide are homeless. That's not how it's supposed to be. According to the U.S. State Department, this past March, there's an estimated 27 million slaves being held worldwide, more than any other point in human history. This one just gets me right here. Is Human Rights Investigations by Shared Hope International discovered minors were sold into a sex act an average of 10 to 15 times a day, 6 days a week, totaling between 9,000 and 14,000 sex acts a year. The average age of entry of a girl into sex trafficking is 13. Not how it's supposed to be. On Sunday, December 26, 2004, an earthquake triggered a series of devastating tsunamis along the coast of the Indian Ocean, killing over 230,000 people in 14 countries. In 2005, I had the opportunity to visit the country of Rwanda, where in 1994, there was a genocide where 800,000 Rwandans were brutally killed, with most of them machetes, in a period of a month. That country only has 8 million people. It's not how it's supposed to be. According to Joshua Project, there are 4,358 people groups that have less than 2% population of evangelical Christians. That's 2.85 billion people with most likely no knowledge of who Jesus is and nowhere to get that knowledge. It's not how it's supposed to be. According to the Alan Guttmacher Institute, there are 1.1 million unborn children aborted each year in the United States. Planned Parenthood reports that 1 out of every 3 women in America has an abortion. According to the American Association of Suicidology in 2010, 38,364 people committed suicide in the United States. Not how it's supposed to be. On December 14th, Adam Lanza shot and killed his mom, 20 elementary students at Sandy Hook before shooting himself. 5 months earlier, on July 20th, James Holmes shot and killed 12 men, women, and children during a screening of The Dark Knight Rises in Aurora, Colorado. 2 months ago, I went on a retreat with my parents' church, and there was a woman there who I met. 2 days later, she had a sudden brain aneurysm, and within 54 hours, she died. She left behind 3 little girls. I was there in the ICU watching her husband and all of her best friends say goodbye to her. Not how it's supposed to be. According to McKinley Irvin, 50% of marriages in the United States end in divorce. That means there are 2.5 million marriages that are divorced each year in the U.S. alone. That's not how it's supposed to be. And unfortunately, I could go on and on. And when I really think about these facts and don't just have a cold heart to them, the truth is it is startling, it's appalling, and most of the time it's really unbelievable. I don't even know how to fathom it or think about it. And I think there's 2 common responses towards this overt brokenness that we see in our culture today. One, and this is one that I do, is that we unknowingly ignore it. We unknowingly ignore it. Even though these facts and these stories are readily available to us, we do not want to hear them. If we're honest with ourselves, we don't want to do anything about it, so we just don't talk about it much and we don't think about it. And we can tend to get frustrated at people who belabor these points and sort of not intentionally take a don't worry, be happy approach. I think this is also sort of a reason why there are so many activist groups and so many awareness groups out there, even on our campus. It's because our culture's default is to be comfortable and not be aware. I think something that we totally do when we see this broken world is we unknowingly ignore it. The second thing that we do is we get angry at God. This is different. When we actually see this, when we're faced, and we actually can see that these really hard things, we can look at God and say, well, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? In Australia a few years back, there was a bus ad that read, "If God exists, he better have a good excuse." I think that totally typifies this response. We see the brokenness, we see the pain, and we ask, how can a good God do this? We build resentment and bitterness toward God. And I want to put those 2 responses on hold really fast. And before we go into how God responds to this terrible brokenness, I want to talk about why it is that there is this blatant pain and these things that are just so wrong and off. Why is there brokenness? So why is there brokenness? According to the Bible, and all this is going to be a Christian worldview tonight. So if you come here and you don't hold to a Christian worldview, I'm so glad that you're here. That's awesome. And I would love to defend why I believe in a Christian worldview. But tonight I'm just going to go from the Christian worldview and explain it. You can also go to the On Guard series. That would be a great opportunity. But according to the Bible, the reason why there is brokenness, we can see it starting in Genesis 3. That answers that question. Because in the Bible, man was created in God's image, and we were created in perfect fellowship with God in the Garden of Eden. But in Genesis 3, we see that Adam and Eve choose to be their own gods rather than submitting to the one true and only good God. So God gives them up to their own desires, and they are banished from his presence. Created man is no longer able to be with Creator God. Creation and Creator are separate. And there are massive repercussions because of this. I literally do not think I could possibly overstate how big of repercussions there are because of what happened in Genesis 3. Theologians call Genesis 3, when Adam and Eve chose their own way instead of God's, the fall. So I'll refer to it also as the fall. So because of the fall, because of what happened in Genesis 3, here are some of the repercussions. One is that all of the cosmic world was subjected to futility. When man sinned, the cosmic universe was subjected to futility. Earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, all of those happened because God subjected the cosmic universe to futility. This is in Romans 8. that we can see this. And so man's sin is even the cause for all that's happening around us when it comes to any natural disasters, all that's not right even in that area. That's because of man's sin and the fall. The second thing, because of Genesis 3, is that we are born into a twisted and crooked nature. This nature the Bible calls our flesh. As Romans 2 says, the entire human race is under sin, and we are separated totally from God. Romans continues to say that we are at war with God and that no one is righteous, not even one. No one even seeks for God anymore. We are at war. Each one of us here in this room is born with that desire. We naturally crave twisted desires. And why is that important? Because our internal desires lead to our external brokenness. Our internal desires lead to external destruction. None of the external destruction that I talked about earlier comes starting from the external issues. It always comes from the internal issues. We have a broken nature, and so we have twisted internal desires that make us crave what is false. Our desires are out of whack. We crave what is false, and then we act on this craving, and then that destroys ourselves and it destroys others. So how does this play out? Right, so we have a desire for power, right? This sort of twisted desire for power that in the end can even lead to genocide. We have an internal desire that ends at external destruction. We have a desire for pride that can externally lead towards rivalries, divisions, and wars. We have this internal desire of selfishness that externally leads to hoarding when other people are hungry. We have an internal desire of selfishness that leads to external divorces all over the place. And we have an internal desire of lust and power, which is what leads to the external destruction of sex slavery. It all starts with the internal desire and it ends at the external destruction. That is always how sin works. So we may ask, who is at fault for all of these evils in the world? You know, we may raise up our hands and we may raise up our fists and be angry at AIDS, at poverty, at hunger, at sex slavery. But if we ask who is the one who's really at fault, we must ask who is at fault? And the answer is me. And the answer is you, and the answer is all of us. We are the ones who are at fault for these things that break our hearts. Every single person on this futile planet has contributed to the external destruction that we have seen. That is a crazy truth, but it is true. Every single person has contributed to the external destruction that we see in the world. We are all at fault. There is not one person excluded. Gandhi even, Mother Teresa even. All have contributed to this external destruction. Sure, some men and women may cause more external destruction than others, but each one of us, if we are honest, can even at least identify with their internal desire. I know the internal desires of my own heart, and if they were played out all the way to fruition, I know that I could become the most wicked and evil man in all of history. And that sort of has to be that's what the Bible says. This is the answer the Bible gives for why that our internal brokenness leads to external destruction. So with all this, what is God's response? What is his response to this overt brokenness in the world? And I have to tell you, to prepare for this talk, I stayed up till midnight last night just researching all of these broken things that were happening, and it was so hard going on poverty.org and looking every 3.5 seconds as a new face of a child popped up and with their name because they had died from hunger-related issues. It was just so hard researching this, and even just hard looking more at the fact that I'm the one who's culpable for it. Like in our human nature, we're the ones who are responsible. But in thinking about God's response, it's like God has opened my eyes all the more to see that his way of responding is perfect. The way that God responds to this overt brokenness is marvelous. It is amazing. And so I pray that you see with me, as God has shown me, how amazing it is, the way that God has responded to this brokenness. I'm just going to highlight really fast 4 main ways that God responds, and then I'll expound on it. But the first way that God responds to the brokenness is that he mourns with us. Our God mourns with us. The second way is that he sends a sacrificial lamb. The third is that he promises that he will send his conquering king to usher in a new kingdom. And the fourth is that he sends his church. This is how God responds to brokenness. So the first way that God responds is that he mourns. Right? This is huge. We cannot just pass this up to go just to the theological things that happen, because God first looks at this creation that is separated from him and he mourns. It brings him such sadness. He made us to be with him, and we are separated because of sin, and he hates that. He wanted to give us life, and we chose death. So he is the one who is bellowing out. He is the one who is saying, it's not how it's supposed to be. God is the one who is saying, I made you for so much more and so many better things. God is the one who mourns. You see, when we blame God for the injustice that is happening in the world, very thankfully we miss the point, because that's not at all what's happening. We have a totally wrong perspective of God. He is not the one who is sitting in heaven being really distant and apathetic towards a hurting world. He is the one that is sitting right next to you when you're bawling, and he's crying even harder than you are. And there's a lot of verses that I don't think I have time to read about that too. But this is crazy. In fact, we only have the capacity to mourn because we are made in God's image, right? And he lets us feel how he feels. He mourns, and he has such compassion on us because he made us for so much more. So this compassion is shown most greatly in the fact that he sends his sacrificial lamb. God the Father looks down with compassion on his creation and sees that we are broken on our own. And like a broken mirror, we have no ability to fix ourselves. So the most scandalous thing in all of history, far more wretched than anything I mentioned before, is that God the Father sends his own perfect Son to be a sacrificial lamb.